Hey guys, Hallowed Autistic here with my very first book video. Just real quick, my platform is primarily focused on educating others on Lutheranism and autism, but I also wanted to be a place for me to just autistically info dump people on the books I love. So it's December, it's the end of the year, so I thought I'd begin my very first video with my top 10 books of 2024 that I read. So number 10 is Moby Dick by Herman Melville. This book, I gave it 2 stars out of 5, but it's still on my list because I'm really glad I read it. There's very encyclopedic parts in it where it makes me convinced that Melville was an autistic person whose special interest was whales. But there's a lot of narrative parts in it as well that were really funny and really well written. So I'm still glad I read this. Number 9 is Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. So if you've seen the movie, the first movie a bunch of times like I have, don't think that reading this book won't be worth it, because the movie is a lot different, and I mean a lot different than the book. Like there are deaths that happen in the book that don't happen in the movie, and vice versa. The main idea is still there. Jurassic Park, that's still the thing. There's a lot of science stuff in here that you don't really get in the movie. I mean, that's classic Michael Crichton. So I'd still really recommend picking up this book and giving it a read. It's a classic. At number 8 is Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. Now, this is an incredibly sad story. Now, it didn't make me cry or anything, but I don't cry very easily. And I don't say that because, oh man, I just don't. Maybe it's something to do with autism, I'm not sure. But anyway, it's about 2 guys who are trying to find, trying to be financially solvent during the Great Depression of the 1930s. And one of the characters isn't entirely bright, and he's basically taking care of the other character. And it's just really sad, but so good. Different narrative type of storytelling for the time it was written, but still easy for us to read today. So I'd recommend you pick up this book. Number 7 is Dear Daughter by Elizabeth Little, apparently her debut novel. This was really good. It's about a former socialite / it girl who was she was convicted of murdering her mother, but then she's let out of prison on a technicality. And so she essentially goes undercover to see if she can solve the mystery of who really murdered her mother, although she's not entirely sure if she's the murderer she's looking for. So that in and of itself is just a fascinating concept, and there's a lot of wit and sarcasm too, from the first person perspective of the protagonist. Very good. I'd recommend this for sure. Number 6 is Needful Things by Stephen King. This is, as you can see, kind of a monster of a book. This edition is 731 pages, but it's about a store that opens called Needful Things, that is like an antique store or curio shop where the proprietor, he sells to people not only the things that they believe they really need, but he, in exchange, he lets them pay whatever price they believe it's worth, and he gets them to pull seemingly harmless pranks on people, and all this just builds this giant snowball effect where everyone in the town basically just literally loses their minds and things go crazy. So it's very fascinating. It's very fun to read, and I had a really good time reading it. At number 5 is The Never-Ending Story by Michael Ende. This was a reread. I first read it when I was maybe 10 years old. Back then I of course saw the movie first, and then I picked up the book, which back then, like 400 whatever pages was a lot to me, but it's not really that much now. But back then I really liked it. This is technically dark fantasy, but it was my introduction into fantasy in general, so this book is responsible for my love for the fantasy genre, whether it's video games or books or movies. So I reread it and it still holds up. It's an absolutely wonderful book. Just amazing themes in there. And, it's the never-ending story, not because, how can it be the never-ending story if the book ends? That's not what it means. If you want to know what it means, read it. Number 4 is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I love this book. If you've read Andy Weir's book, The Martian, it's very similar with the humor and and the science. That's not too sciencey, but it's easy for lay people like me to understand. The ending was great. At first, it wasn't. Not only was it not the ending I was expecting, it was also not the ending I wanted, and because of that, I almost gave it 4 stars. But then I realized, well, this is actually a better ending for the protagonist. So I gave it 5 stars because of that. Really, really good book. Number 3 is Exodus, the Archimedes Engine by Peter F. Hamilton. This book is obviously a monster. Over 800 pages, I believe. Yeah, well, almost 900 pages. At least this edition. It's a book on a video game that's being developed by former BioWare developers called Exodus. That's essentially the spiritual successor to Mass Effect. So there's a lot of similarities with that in there, but it doesn't have your typical sci-fi tropes of sentient AIs, aliens, and faster than light travel. So those typical sci-fi tropes are not in here. Rather, it's there's a lot of political intrigue, and instead of aliens, there's just different varieties of evolved humans. That's all I'll say about it. Other than if you don't like slow reading, it's slow because he's doing a lot of world building here. Prepping us for the video game. That's going to be another space opera. I mean, this is a space opera. So it's not. If you don't like that, probably not for you. And if you don't like a lot of sciencey stuff, probably not for you as well. But if you it probably appeals more to gamers, and so if you like Mass Effect, you'd probably really like this book, regardless. So very good. I didn't expect to like this book as much as I did. Okay, deciding what the top 2 books are was really challenging for me, but I finally decided on number 2. Ilium by Dan Simmons. Now, this is a book 1 of a duology. The other book is Olympos. I could talk about this for a long time, but basically, it's the space Iliad. It's the Iliad in space. It's the Odyssey in space. And so this is definitely for literature fans. And if you didn't really like reading the Iliad and the Odyssey in high school, if you were required to read them like I was, then I mean, you will like this book. Even so, I did watch a 2.5-hour YouTube video on what the Iliad was about, because I wasn't required to read that in high school, only the Odyssey. So you might want to do that. It's up to you. But even still, just Dan Simmons is an absolute genius when it comes to sci-fi and blending other genres within it as well. Just like his series, Hyperion Concepts, which I read last year. But anyway, moving on. Number 1 is Babel by Rebecca F. Kuang. Absolutely amazing. This is, I think, a grim, dark fantasy novel, and it's about a Cantonese boy who's orphaned in Canton, and he's brought to Babel, which is at the heart of the British Empire, by a mysterious benefactor to become a translator. And there's just some really interesting, fantastical elements to read, but I'm running out of time. So just read a synopsis online. This was so good. I cannot stress that enough.